Today we're going to talk about angle relationships. Let's start with two lines. Now these two lines do not have to be parallel, and they're going to be crossed or cut by a third line. And we call that third line the transversal. Transversal is a vocabulary word that you need to know the definition of. It's the line that crosses two other lines. Now, as you've undoubtedly noticed, there's two intersections that are formed. Let's look at the top intersection. And in that intersection, we're looking at the bottom right angle. Now, if you look at the second intersection and you look at the bottom right angle of that intersection, those two angles are what we call corresponding angles because they are both in the bottom right when we have the transversal cutting across those two lines. Now, the angle doesn't always have to be in the bottom right. It just has to be in the same relative position. So if we label these angles A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, then we can say that angle A is corresponding to angle E because they're both in the same relative position. And similarly, angle B and angle F are corresponding, and angle C and angle G are corresponding, and angle D and angle H are corresponding. If we label the two lines that are cut by the transversal with these arrowheads, then that means that the lines are parallel. Now, here's something that you may have noticed. If the two lines cut by the transversal are parallel, then the corresponding angles are congruent. What that means is that angle A is congruent to angle E because the two lines cut by the transversal are parallel. And similarly, angle B is congruent to angle F, and angle C is congruent to angle G, and angle D is congruent to angle H. And that's all because the two lines cut by the transversal are parallel, and therefore the corresponding angles are congruent. Now, please remember, the two lines don't have to be parallel, and if they're not, then that means the corresponding angles are not congruent. Here we've got two lines cut by transversal again, and once again, they do not have to be parallel lines. If you look at the four angles that are between the two lines that were cut by the transversal, we call those interior angles because they are on the interior of the two lines. And the four angles formed outside of the two lines are called exterior angles. Again, if they're between the two lines, they're called interior angles. And if they're outside the two lines, they're called exterior angles. Now that we've looked at the two lines cut by the transversal, let's look at the transversal itself. And the transversal has two sides. We have one side or the other side. And if two things are on the same side, we surprisingly call it same side. And if they're on opposite sides, we don't use the word opposite, we use alternate. So in this example, the horse and the pigeon are same side, but the horse and the squirrel are alternate. Similarly, the horse and the shark are alternate, but the shark and the squirrel are same side, and the pigeon and the shark are alternate because they are on opposite sides. So remember, if it's same side, we say same side, and if they are on opposite sides, we say alternate. And just one more thing to add about the angles. If they are alternate angles, they need to be at different intersections. So they cannot be at the same intersection. So here's our two lines cut by a transversal with our angles labeled. So A and E are corresponding angles, and they're congruent if the lines are parallel. Similarly, B and F are corresponding and congruent if the lines are parallel. Now let's look at same side interior. Well, C and E are same side interior angles, and D and F are same side interior angles. Similarly, A and G are same side exterior. Now for alternate, we have C and F as alternate interior angles, and D and E are alternate interior angles, and A and H are alternate exterior, and B and G are alternate exterior angles. Now, something that's really cool about alternate angles, if they are alternate interior angles, they are congruent if the lines are parallel. And if they are alternate exterior angles, they are also congruent if the lines are parallel.